Welcome back to Let the Quran Speak. Well, you've all heard the news by now of a young woman, 32 years old, Marwa al-Shabini, who was killed in Germany in a courtroom. Brother Shabir, what are your thoughts on this case? Very strange to think of a woman being stabbed in a courtroom so many times.
Yeah, a case like this causes us to think about many related issues. One is the rise of a certain degree of Islamophobia in Europe. Two is the way in which Muslims might react to some such incident. And three, we should think more generally about the vulnerability of Muslim women who go about wearing the Muslim headscarf.
All right, so what would you like to address first then?
Well, if we think about the rise of Islamophobia in Europe, perhaps it's not confined to Europe, but there is certainly a manifestation of it there. Many Muslims living in France, in the United Kingdom, in other parts of Europe, do feel a sense of isolation. They feel that the media is continuously looking into Muslim issues with a very critical eye.
Mm-hmm.
And
you hear this especially from Muslims in Europe, like first-hand accounts. People will tell you
yes,
the situation is very difficult for them.
Yes, and that situation is not helped by, for example, the French Prime Minister seeking a ban on the Muslim headscarf in public, even if it is with all of the full extent, including the niqab and so on, the face covering. Mm-hmm. While all Muslims would not agree that a woman has to cover her face in public, at the same time, most Muslims would recoil at the suggestion that this should be banned. Not to speak of Muslims, even non-Muslims insisting on the freedom of an individual to dress according to his or her choice would find this to be appalling, that the Prime Minister of a country should be calling for a ban on this in public. But while that has repercussions for the question of individual freedom, which all people are concerned about, at the same time it feeds into that sort of Islamophobia, because when the public hears this coming from a public official, they take this to have a certain degree of authority, and they take it to be coming from some springboard of wisdom. Mm-hmm. And so they think that this is the statement of wisdom here, and if Muslims are, even though they are few, if they are insisting on following some Islamic more or custom that is contrary to this, they must be somehow backward people. And of course, this leads to a certain degree of dehumanization. It feeds into that general sense of victimization which the Muslims there may feel.
So you think there's a relationship between the statements of public officials, or the stances of public officials, and the actions of, say, this individual who took it upon himself to stab this woman?
I wouldn't trace a direct or even a close connection. I would only say that if we think in contrast of our Canadian situation, where generally it would be politically incorrect for our public officials to make any such statement that would demean any particular group or minority, or their religious beliefs or practices or customs. So once this is the politically correct situation, this feeds into the milieu in which we live. It feeds into the mindset of the general public. So by contrast, on the other hand, that sort of milieu which is being now cultivated in Europe, which might be characterized as having a good degree of Islamophobia built into it, would naturally feed into the public mindset, and then of course can inform the action of an individual. Of course, the causes of this individual's action the causes are multiple and complex. We don't know that much about the individual. What has fed into his great degree of hate? Certainly it takes a great amount of hate and rage for him to stab a pregnant woman 18 times. And they're right in the public view. Mm-hmm. So we can't say that there is a close and direct connection, but at the same time we can say that all of these actions or the statements of public officials can, to a certain small degree at least, contribute to some of this outcome.
What do you think of the media's coverage of the event itself?
Well, it is rather surprising that in Germany itself and in other parts of Europe, the newspapers hardly had anything to say about this. We came to know of this due to the great outcry that came from Egypt, where the funeral actually was conducted.
And the story was sort of framed in those terms, you know, angry Egyptians are protesting against this case.
And so it is interesting that you know, if a Muslim does something, then it is usually blown out of proportion. This is what Muslims do, it would seem, from such articles that cover incidents like that. But in this case, it was said to be a lone wolf sort of person. He's Russian, so he's not really German. So there is a different coloring on the event, and I don't completely go against that way of framing things and trying to understand the situation as an isolated case, if it is an isolated case. But one should reflect on the double standard, the way in which a Muslim might be represented in the media and the way in which now a non-Muslim might be represented. I think we have to be fair, and both Muslims and non-Muslims have to be fair in this, in the way we represent the other. There is no reason for the Egyptians, as painted in some of the articles, to characterize all of Germany as being somehow against Islam, based on the activity of this one person. And certainly we can see that this one person does not represent any one group of people anywhere. His actions are ghastly and totally unacceptable.
Some Muslims have pointed out that this reminds them of the story of Aqsa Pervez, where the media had the outcry against this woman who didn't want to wear the hijab and her father killed her, was so immense compared to the outcry in this case, where a woman was wearing the hijab and was killed for that purpose.
Yeah, of course the parallel is not complete in that this woman in Egypt was not killed, we should say, from Germany. She was not killed in Germany for the simple fact that she wore the hijab. Her case is a little bit more complex in that she was first labeled a terrorist by this individual. She took him to court. He was convicted and fined. There was an appeal. And it was when they showed up in court for the appeal, waiting for the trial to begin, that he attacked her. So he didn't necessarily attack her for the fact that she was wearing the hijab. He probably attacked her because he hated Muslims. And in fact, it was noted in his earlier trial, when he was convicted, that in fact he has exhibited a great amount of hate for Islam and Muslims. So that hatred can be related in part to the fact of her hijab and to other aspects of Islam as well.
All right, thank you for that. We'll have to end it. When we come back, we will look at the devotion to saints. Do Muslims have this practice within Islam?